Hey everybody, I'm just getting on the stream right now. Sorry for the late start today. Let me get the tweet out and we will get started. How's everybody doing tonight? I know that probably many of you are wrapped up in the final dramatic moments of the Super Bowl, but I had completely forgotten that was today. I even talked to somebody about it, not even thinking that like, oh hey, that stream you were gonna do is probably gonna coincide with the Super Bowl. Come make spooky monsters with us. So we'll see. Maybe people won't show up tonight. I posted a poll about it on Twitter, but I didn't get tons of response. So we'll see. If people are here, great. If not, I'll probably do a little work on the dwarf campaign and then call it a night. But we'll just see. You know, people might show up, and that would be cool if they did. Good job. Okay. Tweet that. Great. All right, so on the docket tonight, we are talking about monsters. I have three different sort of groups or categories of monsters, and then a big list of other types of monsters that I did some research about. We're just going to talk a little bit about how I'm going to use some of these monsters and how to flesh them out and make them a little bit more interesting for my upcoming dwarven campaign. So the three dwarven monsters I wanted to deal with today, or dwarf-adjacent monsters I want to deal with today, are the Darrow, the Frost Giants, and the Troglodytes. Each one of them kind of fills a different niche. There are obviously lots of other monsters. Hey, what's going on, Jose? There are obviously lots of other kinds of monsters that will feature into the campaign. I made a big list of everything underground and mountainous that I could find down here. But we're going to talk about these three groups today as our primaries. And they're all very different. They fill different niches, and the idea was to kind of develop them a little bit more and make them less of just like, oh, you blunder into a random encounter with some Darrow or crazy dwarves, the end, right? Like give them a little bit of history, a little bit of culture, and maybe develop some adventure hooks. Full Norse monsters? What do you mean, Jose? So these are not all Norse, like troglodytes aren't Norse. Frost giants have some Norse stuff for sure. The Darrow kind of, but again, I'm trying to decouple the dwarves from just being Norse, entirely Norse monsters. That's their origin, right? But that's kind of Tolkien's already been there and done that. So yeah, we'll start with unless you guys have a preference, I was thinking about starting with the Darrow just because they're alphabetically first, but we could definitely talk about some of the other two. The troglodytes are the ones I'm maybe the most interested in, just because I want to do something kind of unique with them. I want to do sort of a xenomorph kind of a thing. I want them to be very alien and very unusual, and very like offensive almost, right? That they're unnatural. They don't belong on Earth, and they almost are more like insects or something like that. It's like an infestation of troglodytes is what the party would be dealing with, rather than just, they're just some dumb brutes with clubs, which is traditionally how they're done. I needed like a good Underdark threat for the dwarves, and I felt like, ravening hordes of troglodytes. The troglodytes are kind of like the traditional underground enemy. There's the Koatoa, I guess, as well, which we can talk about. Maybe there's a distinction there. But I kind of wanted one to be front and center, and that was the troglodytes. So we can come back to them. I think they're the ones I'm the most interested in. Yeah, the flavor. I think they're definitely pretty Norse, Jose. We can talk about that a little bit. What do you guys think? It seems like let's talk Frost Giants, and that's what people are interested in. So the basic conceit here is that the giants would be like an exterior enemy. These are so if you look at the geography of Undune, the world that the campaign is set in, Khûm is a little peninsula off of the northeastern continent, Rubicos. Rubicos is very mountainous. It's very forested. A lot of it's kind of like a frontier, sort of pioneer kind of an aesthetic. But the dwarves are kind of cordoned off into their northeastern corner, right? Like protected by these mountain ranges. And then the adjoining continent is called Deimos, and it is frosty, and it is basically this long chain of islands, of frozen islands. And the idea is that every winter, frost giants from Deimos kind of make the trek over to Rubicos and raid and pillage, particularly attacking the shipping of these human communities that are shipping dwarven goods in and out. So the frost giants are kind of like an ancillary threat. They're not immediately a threat. I hadn't seen them immediately as a threat to the like dwarves in their holds. Like giants are less likely to go climb up into the mountains and attack dwarven strongholds. But I like the idea of them as basically these like Arctic pirates. In a previous campaign I had run, the characters encountered frost giants sailing around on these little like icebergs. They called warbergs, right? That had been kitted out for war and had big icy spikes sticking out of them. They'd load giants and orcs up onto these things and then send them out and attack. Which I really liked that idea, and the players were really taken with that, so I kind of wanted to port that idea over from a previous campaign to this one. And so I liked them as these sort of, again, yeah, Nordic is maybe the right way to think of them as basically like ice Vikings, right? Like they're coming across the sea, and they are specifically interested in raiding and shipping and things like that. They're less interested in holding territory. They're less interested in covering all the world in ice and snow. One thing I found that was kind of interesting about frost giants, a little bit of the research I've been doing, frost giants like eating troglodyte legs like humans eat frog legs. Silly. Yeah, they could maybe be nomads. I like the idea that it's like a back and forth, right? That like during the winter they attack, right? That's when they're like the waters are cold enough, their icebergs can make it over into the warmer climes, and they can attack and do their raiding. And then when the summer comes, right, the snow starts to melt and the icebergs start to melt, and they retreat back to colder waters. One thing I thought was interesting about frost giants in a lot of the like D&D lore and stuff they talk about is they don't really produce, like they don't make anything, or the things they make don't make anything. They subside entirely by stealing. You know, they don't have any fire, right? They don't have any steel, and so all of their weapons and things would either be made from like bone or ice, or they would be things that would be stolen. And that's what's kind of interesting, right? Is that like if you're a giant and you steal a sword, right? Maybe they have shamans who can increase the size of things, so you would get like dwarven axes and dwarven weapons that have been increased in size by these giant shamans are now being wielded by frost giants, right? They decide entirely by stealing and plundering. Many of their weapons are simply dwarven or human weapons that have been magically enlarged for their use, right? I mean, and that's the thing you can do with like magic items too, is the idea that if a frost giant picks up a dwarven war axe that's magical and then spends the hour to attune to it, the idea that it would reshape to be usable by the frost giant, I think is kind of neat. That's cool. Yeah, they put ice casings around their weapons. Yeah, that's neat. So they have like a raiding culture, very seasonal. They sweep into warmer waters during the winter, attack and raid, and then during the summer they retreat. So what's interesting, like historically, right, was that one of the seven sorrows I wanted to talk about, right, one of the like terrible calamities that befell the dwarves is that basically the frost giants moved in and didn't ever leave, that they're used to coming back and forth and back and forth. So when one of the things that happens during the Seven Sorrows is basically this endless winter grips Khûm. The volcano explodes and it covers the land in this cloud, and spring just never breaks, right? It's winter for deep into the year, and so the frost giants see no reason to leave, like they stick around, right? And that's one of the things that basically dries up the economy of Khûm, is that these every shipment that goes out is constantly being beset by these frost giant raiders. What's interesting about that, though, is that if that's the case, if the frost giants only subsist on raiding Khûm and raiding dwarven goods and human goods that come in and out of the dwarven homeland, what happens when the dwarves leave? When the dwarves and humans are driven out of Khûm, do the frost giants stick around? Right, like they'd have nowhere to raid anymore. So did they leave during the 500-year gap in between the two? How far away is the volcano from the original giants? When you say original giants, you mean their homeland from Deimos? Then far. The volcano blows up in Khûm, in the center of Khûm. It's basically the centerpiece of the country. So they're definitely here under Seven Sorrows. One of the original sorrows, one of the Seven Sorrows. The frost giant raiders see no reason to depart during the endless winter and establish a stronger foothold, choking all trade. I liked the idea that you had to think about the weapons, in case smaller weapons in icy shells to increase them. Yeah, the volcano is pretty far from the coast. There's maybe an episode we should do at some point about the map. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I could see them being. I think there's a period where it's very warm right after it blows up. But the notion was that it's basically a nuclear winter right after the volcano blows. It's this climatic event, and it's a little magical. It doesn't necessarily have to make exact tectonic sense. Do they have a home base somewhere they strike out from? I'm imagining an island off the northeastern coast that's go to their stronghold, that they've turned into a impregnable fortress of solitude, ice palace kind of a thing. One thing I wanted to play with in recent history, if the giants either return or remain in Khûm, they are faced with new human technology. So during the interim, when everyone flees Khûm at the end of the Second Age, and then they come back partway through the Third Age, humans have invented gunpowder in the intervening 500 years. So I liked the idea that the human merchant company that comes in, the Golden Coast Trading Company, brings gunpowder with them. And now all of a sudden they have this new weapon, particularly, heavy ordnance that they can use to bring to bear against the frost giant attackers. I thought that was kind of a neat idea, that before they had just dominated the sea lanes, right? But now there's a little bit more of a tete-a-tete, that the frost giants suddenly have to deal with this new form of technology, particularly sort of like a blasting fire, right? Which, if they're frost giants and they have icebergs, that's an interesting conflict, right? These big, tall ships firing cannons at icebergs. I don't know, it's cool. It's cool imagery. So that's the question. Did the frost giants remain in Khûm during the exile? Did they grow bored and return to Deimos? Did they move inland and establish a kingdom or something, right? Or jarldom or whatever. And that's kind of neat, that there's some kind of a frost giant establishment now, that they've come inland and are now hunting and stuff in in what would have been Khûm, right? And so one of the plots could be about it, trying to displace the giants. If their whole thing is that they're sea raiders, that they go Irish. There's an island that's called MacLear's Island out of Silhouette it presents. Maybe the photo is like that. Like what? Like McLear's Island. Mishmash of ice rock. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like the idea that they yeah, because this is what's tricky, right? Is that they've already made it as like an established foothold on land. Then when we start the campaign, there would obviously have been immediately be some conflict because I wanted humans to have somewhat established themselves a little bit. That way there can be trade. So there's already got to be some kind of a conflict between the two. And that's what I think is interesting, is that this is the dwarves are not directly involved in this. This is like a conflict between human settlers in the area and these frost giants. Kind of a mishmash of an ice rock / giant statue. Oh, so it looks like a person. I see what you're saying. Jose, okay. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, this isn't connecting with me. Ancient history, before the Seven Sorrows, frost giants would raid periodically, attacking during the winter, but always retreating for the summer, for the snow melt. So yeah, I mean, it seems like they have to stay there, right? Like, they have to have established themselves in some way. The giants stuck around and established a small fiefdom. Did they... Because, like, what's the benefit? If no one is mining and no one is trading anymore, right, then, like, what's the advantage? Giant's Causeway, there's this path that's known to be avoided since it's the place giants usually touch ground when coming to land. That's kind of cool. Yeah, there's, like, a giant's landing. Maybe they do a thing where they freeze the sea, right, that they can, like, make a land bridge of ice across stuff. That's kind of cool. Are you guys getting a lot of blipping on the document? It's kind of being spastic for me. Let me know what it looks like. Small fiefdom in Khûm. Yeah. What's their political situation like? Oh, that they freeze the ice? Yeah, I think that's cool. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Let me try something. 1 second. Try to delete that. I'll have to readjust it because it's going to be way too big. Whoa! Let me see if I can fix this. Sorry, everybody, playing with my overlays. Okay. Sorry, fixing it. Okay, now if we put that underneath. There, let me know if that's any better. Still seems like it's doing it. It's a real arched ice bridge made out of giant standing stones. You can see by day how the ice forms between them until the bridge is completed. It's kind of cool. Like, I do want them to have, you know, ships and stuff. But, like, a big ice bridge seems neat. Maybe they built that since, you know, like, once the dwarves, like, retreated, they were able to finish completion on this bridge. So it, like, goes out into the bay or whatever. A massive ice bridge spanning between giant standing stones. What do the giants get out of remaining here? Like, it's essentially a colony. They tax and attack shipping that goes around the horn. Goes around the horn. Yeah. I like the idea that they would have established the bridge since the dwarves and the humans have retreated. That like it was something they were never really able to do before, but now they've set this thing up. There's this like ice bridge that spans out into the harbor. By the time the campaign starts, dwarves and humans have been moving back into Khûm for about 50 years. So there's definitely... Maybe they've broken the bridge and it's still kind of weirdly there. Or they're trying to hold it or something like that. Like, I think we're... God, all this blipping. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. Let me try to close some stuff. Good hunting, maybe. Yeah, I mean, that could be a big thing. Like, in Diamos, it's basically just like ice flows. There's not a lot of like good solid ground. So maybe they're drawn in because they're able to like establish, you know, holdfasts and stuff. You get a test. They send the youngest to survive by being there. When the grown-ups get there, the ones that have earned their place as adults. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like a spiritual element. Then when the humans return, this is maybe a threat, right? Like when the humans return, when the humans and dwarves return to Khûm, how do the frost giants react? I mean, ostensibly they would see this as a good thing, right? They would see this as, okay, now there's someone here, we can attack again and steal their stuff. Right, because they've been without it essentially for 500 years if they've remained. I mean, the obvious answer is that they react violently, right? Like they attack or they try to defend their holdings, but it just seems like that's... I don't know. Yeah, what is going on with my stream right now? It's being very weird. There are options. Option 1... They react violently. They attempt to defend their new holdings and prevent humans and dwarves from returning to Khûm. Option 2, Khûm. Option 2, right, is that they... that's interesting. They welcome the returning humans, returning merchants, thinking they'll have more to plunder and raid, but are surprised by the force of gunpowder the humans bring to bear. Like, I think there's something kind of interesting maybe in doing like a King Louis thing where like the leader of the Frost Giants, whoever their current Jarl is, becomes like obsessed with gunpowder and trying to get a hold of it to use it, right? That like maybe they're called something like, you know, Jarl whatever, Fire Friend or something like that, that they suddenly think this could be the thing. So yeah, so they're established and the humans come back. I think the Frost Giants let them come back and are kind of like biding their time, like, haha, we'll wait. And then when the humans start to mine and sell goods and trade, and then we'll start to attack them. And when they do, they get trounced. They get trounced by the gunpowder, right? And now they're suddenly like, shit, what do we do? Maybe they're driven out of their initial hold, right? Out of their mainland, and they have to go back to their old island fortress, and now they're kind of brooding. Yeah, I like that idea. So I think it's this one. Jarl, the current Frost Giant Jarl, is obsessed with gunpowder. Their way of smiling at them and feeling knowing they'll have a good time, so they'll let them stay. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah, they let it happen. They don't really deal with them. They just kind of like let the humans move in, and they're very like, I mean, maybe they go so far as like send an emissary, but I think they just like, you know, they don't react, they don't respond, they just stay in their holds, in their like strongholds or whatever and wait for the humans to get themselves established. And then once they do, they think, okay, cool, we'll start to raid them and take their stuff, take the mining, take the precious metals and stuff that they're shipping out. And that's when they get trounced. Called Fire Friend or something similar. Wants to claim the technology. And that makes sense too, right? That they're all about thieving. They're all about taking and raiding. They don't know how to make anything. Let's talk about their culture a little bit more. They have 2 bases. A mainland stronghold, which they recently lost to the humans. Maybe the humans have set up in there. Golden Coast is now using this as a forward operations. It's forward operations or like a naval defense. They have an island stronghold as well that they've fallen back to and are currently plotting their revenge. And another important thing too is that the winter is breaking. The winter is breaking as the campaign progresses. The snow begins to melt and weaken the giant's position. They may be forced into something desperate, right? That they may try some crazy plan. Let's talk about their culture a little bit. Like, they're led by a raiding jarl, probably. The strongest warrior or greatest tactician. How do you spell tactician? Tactician. They definitely have some kind of spiritual component. Like, I think they're magical. Magical culture. Able to manipulate ice and snow. I have, cryomancy or whatever. Cryomancy. Soot Hand, that's cool. I like Soot Hand. I'll put that under the list. Or Soot Hand. Are there a lot of Johans in antiquity? I'm not familiar. Yeah, so they have like ice magic. The typical like savage culture thing to do, right, is to say like, oh, there's the warrior and the priestess or whatever, the warrior and the witch, and they rule in concert, which is fine, but it seems a little bleh. Let me think about like Nordic culture. Like, there were vulvas, right? There were snowman golems is cool. Yeah, I like that. Ice golems. How are they ruled? Well, maybe you do a thing, you base it more on Icelandic culture, right? That like maybe the traditional frost giant culture back in Deimos and their homeland is much more monarchical. But out here, because it's a colony, they function a lot more like an Icelandic colony, and they vote, so they have things. Yeah, that's cool. Democratic, and that makes them feel more pirates. Democratic. As remote colonists, they vote on everything. So then there's like interesting. Oh, sure, that makes sense. Bach and Pachelbel. They vote on everything. Introduces unusual politics. Maybe there's a faction of frost giants who want peaceful relations with humans. At least enough to trade. Right, that they've established this colony, and by immediately attacking the humans, they've soured any chance of a partnership. Kind of a Kingdom of Many Arrows thing. If anybody knows that, like, FR lore, right? Like, the idea of Obold, or like establishing sort of like a monster nation. I think that's kind of cool that there's like some conflict there. Benevolent, cruelty-filled democracy. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I do still think they vote, right? Like that's a big deal. But I think it's a lot of like, yeah, there's a brutocracy to it as well, right? You know, a better warrior is going to get more votes than a worse warrior. But you might be able to be cunning in the way that you trick or deceive your enemy. Like I like the notion of a democracy. So there could be some interesting politics there with like, you know, maybe it's less about just defeating the frost giants and more about putting a frost giant in power that the party can work with, right? It's not, you could just out and out defeat them and that's fine. Yeah, I wonder if there's that they're being like, I like the notion that they're being like hammered by Golden Coast. The Golden Coast has like chased them out and is now got them on their heels, and they're debating some kind of a terrible response. Maybe there's a thing with like magical response to Golden Coast pressure. Like they want to bring, I know this is the opposite of what we said before, bring about a second eternal winter. Like the shamans or vulvas or whatever feel the winter slackening and want to worsen it to maintain their hold on the icy waters. You know. So that could be a thing, or there's a plot where they're trying to like, maybe that's a hook. So one of the hooks is a frost giant faction wants peace. Humans and dwarves for the purposes of trade. That's one. The frost giant faction wants to cover all the world in a second winter, or all of Khûm. Second winter, to solidify their hold. Why did that turn bold? To solidify their hold over the region. It's kind of cool. Yeah, the democratic. They steal everything. It's like a kleptocracy, right? Raiding culture. I think they're all about giant animals and skulls. It's the only thing they can produce. They sing and aggrandize their accomplishments in the hunt. Yeah, if they think of themselves as pirates and raiders, they're all about hunting down prey, and it's all about predator and prey and stuff like that. They're kind of similar to my orcs, I guess, in that way. The orcs are a very sort of animalistic culture and all about hunting and prey and stuff like that, and the herd. God, I don't know why it's being so blippy. I apologize, guys. That's dumb. That feels pretty good for frost giants. Are there other things? One more hook would be cool. Maybe they need like a certain artifact. It makes me think of the Casket of Eternal Winter or whatever to do their second winter thing. Yeah, funny. Yeah, that's definitely true. They have kind of a bully attitude. I like them seeming like they're tough bullies, and then they get like sort of punched in the nose and they fall back and they're kind of like, wait, hold on. We're the tallest. We're the biggest. We're in charge. Since when do these puny humans tell us what to do, right? Or keep them on their heels? I think that adds an interesting element to them. Yeah, I think that's all good. If there's anything else to talk about with them. And Khûm, they have a foothold, but they get kicked out of it. Yeah, it's all messy, of course. I can clean it up. I want a little more about their culture. They're all about hunting, all about, maybe there's a faction. They're all about hunting. They're obviously all about ice. What's their religion like? I never really figured out how the giants interrelate with each other, because there are also hill giants and stone giants in Khûm. There were fire giants. There are no longer fire giants there. But I never saw them as having, like, FR has all the giants in, like, the ordning, and it's all about, like, you know, the order and the place. It's like a caste system, which I never quite... I mean, I understand why you do that if you have 5 or 6 different types of giant, but I never quite, like, gelled with that interpretation. I just generally also don't include every single type of giant in every campaign that I run, just because it just seems like so many, you know. Yeah, let's come back. I think these are good. What do you guys want to do? You want to talk about Darrow, like sort of crazy castaway-esque dwarves, or do you want to talk about troglodytes? I think they're both good. I do have Durgar in the campaign as well, but I wanted to keep that relatively quiet because it's a big spoiler. Although Alan's not here, he was potentially one of the players in the campaign, so maybe it's okay to talk about Durgar. Let's do these two, and if we have time, we can talk about Durgar. The Darrow are essentially the descendants of dwarves left behind during the Exodus. They're utterly depraved. They've sort of gone insane from centuries of darkness and isolation underground. You know, an old classic, one of the 2 evil types of dwarves. And then the troglodytes, horrifying abominations from the depths of the earth. Troglodytes are the spawn of Yogg, unleashed upon Khûm by greedy dwarven miners. You know, you needed the Balrog. You needed the thing that the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep, and then awoke that thing from which they fled. The troglodytes are also one of the 7 sorrows. The Darrow aren't exactly, but they kind of are. They talk a little bit about madness spreading throughout the dwarves during that time period. Let's talk about trogs. I think that's the one I want to do right now. How were they left? Oh, you want to talk about Darrow? How were they left behind? I think that's what's interesting, is that I don't think that there's one definitive answer. I think a Darrow, it isn't like there's one group and they're all the Darrow. I think Darrow is like a dwarven word, and it means, you know, crazed or abandoned or whatever, like shame. It's like what happens to a dwarf if they are left behind, right? Or they're sealed within their holds or whatever. I don't think that there's one thing that happened to all of them. I think it's like the natural progression of what happens to a dwarf in that context. So let's talk about it. Yeah, we can do Darrow. How were they left behind? Get out of here. Fine. How were they left behind? There's no one answer. There's no one answer. Some Darrow were perhaps sealed away in their holds. Some Darrow Yeah, I think that's what's interesting, Jose. And this is what I think is something we should talk about with the Darrow. Is like you kind of need that idea of like the crazed underground sort of Morlock type people that like they were once human and now look at them, right? The sort of subterranean mole men thing. But dwarves live underground, right? They're used to being underground, and that's their primary state. So what happened with the Darrow? Why is a Darrow different from a regular dwarf? Like, what's the distinction? What happened to them to make them go crazy? When, like, it's implied that dwarves lived underground for many centuries before encountering humans or even encountering the surface, right? So it's like, what is it about the Darrow that makes them different? Why did they go crazy? God, I do not know what is going on with my stupid thing. Let me try to take it out and put it back in again. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just glitching all over the place. I'm sorry, guys. That's really stupid. Some Darrow became lost in the tunnels. Some Darrow... Yeah. Why did the Darrow go crazy? Don't dwarves like living underground? Because I don't think this is a phenomena that is like isolated to the Seven Sorrows. I think the Seven Sorrows like increased the number of Darrow in Khûm because basically who didn't escape, right? But I think that that's always a thing. I feel like it's like an old like children's tale old children's tale about like the perils of staying inside too long. What are we saying? Basic visualization. They're not at their fingers since they don't have anything to create. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I wanted to play with like excuse me. I wanted to play with the idea of like, do they still have beards? Like, what would they do to themselves? Because they, you know, they're basically suffering this like identity crisis. Yeah, that's really fascinating, Jose, too, because like the whole point, one of the sorrows too, is that like the veins grow dry or whatever, right? That they run out of material. So, you know, they're trapped underground and they don't have anything they can make or build. Maybe that's kind of interesting, and it sort of drives them mad. Yeah, they definitely have pulled hair from the beards. Let's do like a description. Behaviors. Description. Like pale, right, is a big thing. Like a pupilless eyes, or like eyes that are either all pupil. If you're underground all the time and you only see through dark vision, does that make are your eyes really dilated? Yeah, your eyes are super dilated, so they're all pupil. Eyes are super dilated. All pupil, no iris. Dilated eyes, yeah, that's perfect. Sunlight sensitivity for sure. Weak and frightened of sunlight. Nod at their fingers. I think they all have like different kind of psychosis. I don't think it's like every Darrow has all the same, but I think it's like a lot of similar stuff across the different ones. Nod at their fingers. Pulled at their beards and hair. Fully dark pupils. Yeah, I think so. Like just totally black eyes. That's pretty spooky. So yeah, I think it's like a thing that can happen to you if you like. Do dwarves have to come topside every once in a while, or else this happens? Like I like the idea of there being these sort of like grim fairy tale style stories about like cautionary tales, you know, about what happens when you stay underground for too long or you don't see the sun or something like that. Like what is this like the nugget? What is the seed that turns you into a Darrow? You know, it could be sun related, but I feel like it's more about work or greed or something like that, right? It's like what's the moral ill that the Darrow commit? Their eyes glow in the dark. That's kind of cool. Yeah. Glow in the dark. Because they definitely have dark vision. They probably have superior dark vision. I'm doing a thing in the campaign where only dwarves have actual dark vision. And other races have like bringing back a low light where they can see in like starlight or moonlight, but they can't see in total darkness because I wanted that to be like a dwarven thing. Like what is the original sin of the Darrow? And, you know, whether or not that's actually the Darrow's fault is totally, you know, up to speculation. But, like, what did the dwarves say about it? What do they warn against, you know? Because I think they would embrace a life lived underground, you know? Because there are some dwarven clans that like pride themselves on never coming to the surface. So it can't be that. It can't just be that they've never seen the surface. It has to be something else that they've done down below, or some other thing, like a Darrow that never rests, or like a dwarf that never rests, or a dwarf that like has nothing to work on, you know? Either greed or creating something terribly harmful to the clans. Yeah, but I think it's like I think it has to be like a moral ill. You know, I don't think it can be like once upon a time they did a bad thing and now they're punished for it. That's more of a Duergar. But I feel like the Darrow is like a thing that could happen to any dwarf. You know, if they go too far down this path, you become a Darrow, right? They're like Reavers, I think, in that sense, right? Where it's like I guess Reavers are a bad example because Reavers are like when you find out the lore or whatever. Spoilers for Serenity, I guess. But when you find out the lore, it's like only a small percentage of these people were turned into Reavers. But the implication in the show is that Reavers are just like made crazy by exposure to deep space, right? Like by going out into the void, they were driven mad. I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about like dwarves that they worked too hard, or they were too greedy, or like It's something like that. Did they work too hard? Were they too greedy? Because again, the sunlight makes sense. At least if you throw a dwarf onto the sun, they become mad to go back into the dark. Oh, so it's like the opposite? Dwarf that didn't work hard enough? I mean, laziness does seem like the ill for dwarves, right? Like they're all about work. Laziness. It's kind of interesting. So the conceit is that they spent too much time on the surface and it drove them mad. Were blinded by the light. I just feel like that would produce the opposite effect, you know? God, this stupid... Stop doing that. Ugh. It annoys me. I'll put it down, though. Did they spend too much time in the sun? They work too hard. Were they too greedy? They spend too much time in the sun. What's the deal? I think, like, the actual lore is something about, like, how there was a clan of dwarves that got captured by mind flayers, and then they were tortured, and they became the Duergar, but some of the dwarves escaped and fled, but then got lost in the Underdark, and they became the Darrow. So it's like, it's very nested in a way I don't like. Like, I like them being separate things. Like, a Darrow is a dwarf who's lost their way, whereas a Duergar is like a corrupted dwarf. Something has happened to them, but like an external force rather than an internal. I think it has to be something internal. It's like a decision that a dwarf made, or you know, a tragic flaw or something like that. Like they've always, okay, so we'll go to history. They've always existed, dwarves that lost their minds for whatever reason. But they were mainly stories to frighten children with. You know, it's like how we would tell stories about serial killers or whatever. It's like, this is, oh man, they look like a person, but they're just, you know. Thinking it like, they see any laziness as you're too much like a human, so out you go. It could break the identity and psyche. But if they send them out, then they wouldn't become cave creatures, right? They would live on the surface. They'd be surface creatures. It's an interesting idea. Like, I think laziness is one of the, like, prime sins of the dwarven people. You know, one of the things that they struggle against the most. And so, like, a lazy dwarf would be seen as, like, an aberration, you know? So I think that that's cool, that there's something there. But I don't see the surface connecting to it. I think they have to avoid the surface, have to hide from the sun. You know, they're deep-dwelling, like... Because my instinct is the opposite. Like, they worked too hard. You know, they work themselves to the bone. The lesson is that, like, yes, you want to work hard, but if you do it too much, then eventually you're driven mad, you know? No, if they go back to the dark. I guess, I'm sorry, I just don't understand, Jose. I mean, I think it could be cool. I'm worried that... So they get kicked out of their clan, and they're sent onto the surface, and then they, like, run back into the darkness? You know? I just feel like there's, like, a weird step there. The number of Darrow greatly increased during the Seven Sorrows. They make sure to keep in the dark. It's like total breakdown, and they don't trust anyone anymore, so they keep going darker and darker. Don't trust anyone. What do they create? And the madness thing. Like, I think that's, yeah, I think we're close. I think we're missing I don't see the connection between like human, like dwarves saying that you're too much like a human, so they put them out of the clan and they go to the surface and then they run back inside because they're scared of the sun. You know what I mean? Like there's like a piece missing there. It's not bad. They're lazy. I mean, like, is it just as simple as, like, dwarves who don't make things, right? Like, if a dwarf goes too long without creating something, that they slowly become a Darrow, right? That like it's the pure act of creation that's important to them. So it could be attributed to laziness, right? It could be attributed to like lacking ideas or whatever, right? Think of it like a badly treated pet. It pees inside, so you put the pet out while you clean, and so then when the pet goes back inside, it doesn't trust you, and they go hide. Yeah, I guess. I just feel like it's an extra step. I mean, that could happen to like a clan or a dwarf, right? I feel like that could happen in a few isolated cases. I just think that wouldn't happen in every single instance of them. I think it is something that a dwarf who doesn't make something over a certain period of time. And again, like you said, you could tie that to laziness, or you could tie it to lack of resources, or you could tie it to like jealousy almost. That like, there's a story about a Darrow or a dwarf whose work was all being copied, and so they decided not to make anything, and they got so paralyzed by their indecision about what to make that they couldn't create. It had stopped them, and that's what sort of drove them mad. So it would make sense to me that then during the Seven Sorrows, any of the dwarves who would stay behind... Yeah, it is. It's like writer's block. Yes, exactly. That would drive a creative soul mad. Yeah, it's like they stuck in perpetual writer's block. Okay. That's it. So again, I think that and then they don't want to come out, they don't want to go out to the world because they're still working, right? And so like I think that they like make things, but they're like weird, horrible, insane devices that don't function and they have no purpose. That they've like crafted this thing, but it falls apart and it's trashy, and like a dwarf who cannot or does not create slowly goes mad. Like maybe the dwarven word for writer's block is Darrow, right? Yeah, I think they would technically just have one R the way I have dwarven language work, because I don't do repeated consonants. But like Darrow being the word that means like creatively bankrupt or something like that, right? Like writer's block. Yeah, what they make is nonsensical. Like they're and shoddy. I'm imagining making like Rube Goldberg machines and stuff like that. Like is it Rube Goldberg-esque contraptions that serve no purpose and are otherwise like insane. They serve no purpose and are flimsy. The QVC for dwarves, yeah, exactly. Are flimsy and breakable. They kind of similar to frost giants. I think they steal finished goods and obsess over them. I could see like a Darrow like capturing someone and opening them up to like see how they work on the inside. Like they're obsessed with creating and making, but they can't. Like the part of their brain that does that doesn't work anymore. Obsess over them. They cut open their captives to understand how they work. They make gruesome golems or undead or something like that. It's North End of the useless box. I'm not familiar. Some golems. Yeah, I like the idea that they make golems. They make like weird flesh golems or something. That's interesting. Dwarves sealed within their vaults. Or lost in the Underdark. That went mad. I think like enough trauma or something like that could make that happen too, right? Like, it's gross, it's maybe a little much, but something like that I think is interesting. That they try to like, look, I made a person or whatever. They cobble them together out of weird parts. Yeah, they fear the sun. Hooks threats. So is it Darrow? What I think is interesting about it is that like, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think they have some I like the idea they have just enough knowledge, or they, again, not all Darrow are like this, but some, right? But like they have just enough knowledge of craftsmanship to be dangerous. You know, they have just enough that they could like make these things that are these horrible pale imitations, right? Like their weapons are all weird and strange and don't really work, and like, because there's something interesting to me about the Darrow like not actually being dangerous, you know? Like they're being frightening and scary, and like something that could happen to a dwarven character potentially if they like go down this path. But like I like them not being, they don't have any big machinations. You know, maybe there's like a mad, well, that's kind of interesting, like a mad Darrow king. A mad Darrow king attempting to create something huge and grandiose. So they're like stealing stuff. Impractical. Grandiose. They have like, to me, they have kind of like an Alice in Wonderland sort of like screwy, you know, mentality. Are they dangerous? Or are they merely unnerving? You know? I don't think that they have like a leader, because I don't think that they're a unified group. But I could see them pulling in, you know, like other Darrow. I think it's not a king that went Darrow. I think it's like a beggar king kind of a thing, right? It's like a they have voted this Darrow to be the genius or whatever. Like I don't think it's. I think they're like isolated pockets, right? Like you might find one hole that's full of Darrow, you know, that was his clan that sealed themselves in. There might be like a group of them wandering around in the tunnels, you know, and there might be like one dwarven family has like a family member that went Darrow and they like keep locked up. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like a condition more than it's a faction, you know. But I do think there's a plot line of like there's like a little small little kingdom or clutch of Darrow that this guy has pulled in all these others and they getting them all to work on this insane thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're a leader, you know, that they've like convinced other Darrow of their like incredible vision. I like that. I want to put that. Prominent clan has a family member that went Darrow, and they keep them locked up somewhere. A public shame, right? Like, they don't want anyone to know about it. Another Darrow plot could be... I like the idea that they're just kind of... like, they're not dangerous. Not inherently. Not inherently. They have a dangerous mindset. But to me, they're almost more like Smeagol or Gollum or something like that, where like they're tragic and they're frightening. But they, you know, because you see them and you see how distant they are to a dwarf, but you know that like a dwarf, that was once a dwarf, and now look at it. They're pathetic and wretched and can cause trouble or mischief. But they are more pathetic and tragic and unnerving than they are an actual threat. You know, like a Darrow encounter isn't about a combat. You know, it's about, look at this weird guy and his weird mentality, and can you bring them back, and can they be cured? And like, yeah, they lost all common sense. That's good. All common sense and social limits and like spark of creation. Like they desperately want to create, but they can't. You know, I just think that that's a more interesting encounter than, oh, and you might have to fight them. I'm not saying you wouldn't fight them, but like, oh, look, they're scary, they cast spells. Like, that's just, you know, we have that already. You know, the Duergar can be a real threat in that way, where I think the Darrow are just meant to creep you out more than they're meant to actually threaten you. And again, you could certainly have encounters with Darrow that turn to combat, but I like that that's not the goal most of the time. You know, most of the time it's just like, this was a dwarven smith, and now look. You know, what happens? Do they have children? Oh, maybe they can't have children either. But I guess if they can't have children, then Like, why? How could there still be Darrow? You know? Because I like the idea they can't create anything, right? They can't have. They're like infertile. They go mad. I'm gonna write that down. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's true or not. Can they breed? Can they have children? Because that could be another thing that they. This is a little creepy and gross, and maybe too much. But like, they could maybe capture people and use them to breed with, right? Like, it's a little gross, but if the idea is that like they envy people who can make stuff, you know, I feel like they kidnap smiths and they kidnap like artists and force them to do things. I don't know if I really want to have like weird forced childbirth rape stuff. That seems kind of gross. But I like the idea of their fascination with childbirth and children, you know. Fascinated with children in particular. And I think that adds like an interesting element to the children's tale thing, right? That like Darrow love to steal children and pregnant women because they're fascinated with creation. And so it like feeds into like the Darrow will come and take you away because the Darrow are interested in children, right? Like, that's kind of cool. So maybe that's it. Maybe they don't interbreed, but they will steal children and then basically turn them into Darrow, you know? They kidnap children and transform them. And yeah, exactly. Exactly. And transform them into Darrow. And I think I think there might even be like an infection element, right? That like if somebody goes Darrow, that whether or not this is true, the dwarves believe that you could catch it. You know, that like it could infect a whole hold rather than just being the one person. Is it infectious? I think that's really interesting. It might not be, right? But it might be treated like it is. Infectious. Once one dwarf goes Darrow, are the others at risk? Can it spread like a disease? Perhaps not, but I think the dwarves think so. Yeah, I like that. It has a boogeyman thing, you know, it has yeah, exactly. They can infect a child's mind. And I think the children are especially susceptible to it. Children are especially... And I think it's like... It's almost an Inception type thing, too, where it's like... susceptible to it. Yeah, that it's like once... It's that doubt. Right, once you come into contact with a Darrow, maybe it doesn't actually infect you, but the idea of it gets in your brain, and then you can't get it out, and that's how you slowly start to become one, right? Like, no actual disease. So there's something wrong with you, and so that's why I think it can't be cured either. No actual disease can't be cured, but it's as infectious as a doubt or an idea. Once a dwarf starts to ruminate on the idea, it's almost impossible to expunge. That like it slowly worms its way into your brain. And again, it's not a disease, it's not magical, it's just a thing that happens to dwarves, like a psychological disorder. And it is infectious and contagious in that way, right? That if you talk to a Darrow for too long, if you hear a Darrow out, essentially, it can have that effect. And so like prolonged exposure increases the likelihood of it. Some horrible chat brought up by Darrow who would be horrible. Yeah, exactly, right? Maybe they can still create, but it's weird and dark and twisted. Darrow are far more common now than they were before the sorrows. They run rampant. Entire holds have fallen to the sickness and threaten to infect others. Yeah, that's great. Cool. I think that's very good for Darrow. I like them being like a threat to your mind, but not even to your wisdom save, right? Like it's just, yeah, I think that's cool. It's all like out of mechanics and entirely in story. I think that's cool. Let's talk about troglodytes. That's the last one we'll do tonight, maybe, and then I'll probably call it about 7:30. It was a short stream, but I feel like this has been very helpful. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I appreciate it. Got some good suggestions going. I feel better about the Darrow than I did about the Frost Giants. I think Frost Giants still work, but they're a little bit more bog standard, right? So, troglodytes. What I want to do here, and this is the one I think that is going to require the most rehaul, I want to make the troglodytes into sort of scary body horror. Yeah, ooh, that's cool, Jose, right? Like, you have to deafen yourself. Yeah, maybe there's something. Let me go back to the Darrow real quick. Maybe there's something about the way they prattle. Like, something about the way they talk. A Darrow's voice is dangerous. Something about listening to the way they prattle is what infects you. Okay, great, troglodytes. I want to make the troglodytes be this extremely extrinsic alien threat. Like, I want them to feel completely unnatural and very dissimilar. Like, a Darrow is scary because of how close it is to a dwarf, right? I want a troglodyte to be the opposite. I want this to be a xenomorph. I want it to have biology that makes no sense. I want it to have like a body horror element. I want them to be almost more like an insect than a reptile. You know, maybe they still have like the basic conceit that it's like a reptile and it smells bad. But the idea is that they are the spawn of Yogg. And Yogg is, of course, the evil entity at the center of the earth that's contained within a shell of sacristeel, which is this like magic metal, this ore that protects the world from it. The world is basically a prison for Yogg. Obviously, Yogg is the central focus of the campaign that I'm currently running, the evil game. But this campaign, the dwarf campaign, would be set a couple hundred years, like almost a century, almost a millennium before Yogg takes place. And Yogg is still sealed in the earth and has not yet come out. But anyone who delves too greedily might come into contact with things that have been touched by Yogg. So one of the big moments, one of the sorrows in the Seven Sorrows, is that one of the clans, Clan Deepvein, delved too greedily and too deep and unearthed these troglodytes that came sort of pouring up out from under below. Yeah, I don't think they're quite Lovecraftian. They definitely have a Lovecraftian element, but I almost want more of a sci-fi kind of a tone. And so they came pouring up from below, and they managed to run over several settlements and spread themselves out through the stoneways of Khûm. And now, 500 years later, they've kind of like nested in, right? So they're like roaches almost, that they've spread out, and they're kind of everywhere, and they're a huge blight and a big problem, and it's one of the major villain groups that the party will be dealing with. So let me get some of that down. During the Sorrows, Clan Deepvein delved too deep and awoke the troglodytes from deep within the earth. Within the earth, they streamed up and laid waste to several clans, notably Clan Iron Spring, which is another one of the Elder clans. After 500 years, Khûm is infested with troglodytes. Infested with troglodytes. Their nests are everywhere. They are a rampant blight upon the once great kingdom. Let's see. Let's make them out of the tiny insects. That's kind of cool. Fleshworms, heretics, things that infect a diseased body. That's cool. Yeah. So let's talk about. I mean, I don't think they have like one thing I want to say like in their culture. They have none. They are pure killing machines, handcrafted by Yogg to lay waste to dwarven settlements I think they superficially resemble troglodytes from the books. I still think they have to essentially be reptiles, but as insectoid as we can make them, I think that's better. Their poison, or acid, or whatever. Maybe instead of... Because normally what do troglodytes have? They have like a bite attack and a claw attack, and they have like a stench. I think the stench is cool. I'd like to keep that. Let's do like biology. Stench. A huge part of their aesthetic tactics is their putrid stench. Putrid stench. I like the idea that they, like, xenomorphs are all about acid, right? Do the trogs an acidic attack? Because I think there's something... If the trogs were essentially like a biological weapon designed by Yogg, the fact that they currently rely on poison is not great, because dwarves are, you know, resistant to poison and they like have advantage on saves. But I do like that, though. I do like that they're sort of brought low by this thing they're ostensibly good at defending against. So like, is troglodyte poison unique? Is troglodyte poison specifically like chemically designed to work against dwarves? That seems interesting. Not poison per se, make it a flesh rotting liquid. Yeah, I think it's like it's acid, right? That's true. Like the pseudodymitis. I can never get it right. But yeah, that's what they actually have in the book. That's pretty much all they have is a stench, and it's kind of like Frightful Presence or something, where once you succeed on the save, then you're no longer affected by it. They're really not serious threats in the book, you know, in the actual game, and I really wanted to elevate them and make them into something really scary. God, this stupid thing is glitching so much. I don't understand it. Let me try to turn it off and turn it back on again. Flesh rotting liquid. Something with like reproduction. I want gross eggs. Gross egg sacs. Egg sacs. Like ichor and slime. You know, something like that. Like I want you to find like nests, you know, that you have to burn out alien style, you know. Weak or vulnerable to fire. Seems cool to have them have a big obvious one like that. The culture, they have none. They are pure killing machines, handcrafted by Yogg to lay waste to dwarven settlements. They do not have, they are single-minded. I like the idea that they are almost hive-minded. Almost a hive mind. But there's no queen. There's no central intelligence that the party can destroy, because that's Yogg. Because that's Yogg. You know, you get the sense, and they move and they act like they have a hive mind, but it's not like you just go and kill the queen. You could go kill the queen, but that's not the actual leader. That's not the real puppet master. That's Yogg, and there's no way to kill Yogg. So they have this almost inevitable element to them, right? Where they're acid could be used for ingestion. If Yogg crafted maybe something that kills all life, so rotting liquid turns life into something like putrid lettuce. That's cool. Yeah, that it's acid, but it's like super acid, right? It's like an anti-life acid, almost like a necrotic acid. Deals both necrotic and acid damage. Kills all life it comes into contact with. What do they want? You know, I think they want whatever Yogg wants. They want like destruction and chaos, right? They want to destabilize the dwarven. Any mind reading would turn anyone mad. That's interesting. Yeah. Cannot have their minds read immediately provokes wisdom save and short-term madness, because you just see the like spawning chaos of Yogg. Yeah, that's great. Nice job, Jose. That's smart. Something like this. I don't know if this is quite right, but I like necrotic instead of acid. That it's like, you know, anti-life liquid. So how does their life cycle work? Like you had talked before about insects. Make them out of tiny insects, flesh worms, hair ticks, things that infect a diseased body. The idea of ticks or lice is kind of interesting. If they're dwarves, right, that they're trying to get in the beards. Something that infects hair. Infects hair and beards. Lice or ticks. Everything gone, and with the encasing of Yogg gone, they just can't think of it since no brain. Yeah, right. That's great. And they are working in concert with the Duergar, and the Duergar are a little bit more intelligent. So I think that there's like a teamwork there. These are the mindless droves of like insects, whereas the Duergar are a little bit more sentient, and they're able to steer and puppeteer them in certain ways. I think that there's like morphology, right? I think there's worker trogs and soldier trogs and things like that, right? Like there's body dimorphism depending on their role in trog society. I think that might actually be under I don't know if morphology is the right word there, but yeah. Giant lice. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, what is a troglodyte hatchling, you know? I want eggs is the thing. So like I like the idea of lice because they have beards, right? Yeah, the Duergar have tamed the weaker ones. I think that's true. They have managed to like suborn some of them. And I think if the Duergar are also Yogg, like basically they're dwarves that were corrupted by Yogg. So I think that they work in concert. Troglodytes are kind of like an elemental force. Again, think of the xenomorph, right? Like one xenomorph is able to take out that entire ship. I think it's a similar thing where they're just like an unstoppable elemental force. Whereas the Duergar are much more sinister in that they have plans and plots, and they might actually be able to succeed in freeing Yogg, whereas the Troglodytes are just there to destroy. Practically unheard of. Unheard of before the Seven Sorrows. Troglodytes were gestating beneath the earth. Troglodytes were gestating beneath the crust, awaiting someone to awaken them. Oh yeah, that's interesting. So the eggs are like, they look like gems. Yeah, my wife had recommended something like that before. It didn't quite seem gross enough to me. Because I do want them to feel... I think it's a good idea. I'm going to write it down. I'm not 100% sold on it. Do the eggs look like gems or pearls? Something dwarves would greatly desire, only to pop and reveal horrible insect creatures. Horrible hatchlings. So I think the distinction here, and it's a choice. I think either choice is valid, but you basically have to make it. So if you think about the movie Alien, one of my favorite movies of all time, that scene where they go into the nursery, right, and you see all the egg sacs, is scary not because it surprises you, but because, you know, you're full of dread about it. You feel like, oh my God, don't touch that. What are you doing? Don't touch it. And so that's my initial instinct, is to have them be overtly horrible and gross. But I think And then the other option, right, is to have it be a surprise, that it looks like a trap, and then you go and or it doesn't look like a trap, but it looks like something that you want, and then you go and you interact with it, and you discover that it's a trap. And I think that's actually the way to go, because I think that there's a difference between watching a character in a movie do something you know they shouldn't do, and tricking a player into doing it. I think a player is not going to go interact with the gross eggs, right? I want there to be some sense of dread. It's not the egg that's gross. The larvae are the ones you recognize as the horror you brought to civilization. Yeah, I think you're right, Jose. I think that they look like strange gemstones. You know, I do still think that there's like, and you can make them like weird and fractal and stuff, or like, you know, there's something weird about them, but you can't quite put your finger on it. I want the smell, but maybe the smell only happens once you pop the thing, and then this horrible puke. Because yeah, there could be a cool thing with like, okay, the eggs look like strange fractal gemstones designed by Yogg to entice dwarves. I don't think there's anything magical about them. I just think they look, you know, enticing. Once ruptured, they release a nasty chemical and thousands of troglodyte hatchlings, which are essentially lice. So the trogs would go down into the mines beneath a hold, right? And they would lay these eggs. Yeah, they smell awful. I mean, I think they don't smell awful until you poke one, right? And then it bursts. I think they're like there's like high tensile, you know, shell or whatever. So they poke one of these things and it bursts into the ichor. And then I think that it's rather than each egg, rather than having one troglodyte in it, it's like an egg sac. So it's full of little hatchlings, and they get into the dwarf's beard, right? And they nest there, they hide there. I wonder if do you go full facehugger and have them like mosquito-like start to drain, and then they like, you know, turn into little skittery trilobites? Yeah, they live off the dwarf for a time, sucking their blood and nourishing themselves. The dwarf, meanwhile, gets sicker and sicker. Yeah, spider nests, yeah. Gets sicker and sicker. And, you know, you can get that moment when you peel the beard back and you just like a bunch of these things on his neck, right, or whatever. They get sicker and sicker and eventually die. When the dwarf dies, the troglodytes feast on his flesh and scamper on their flesh. I feel like it's missing a step, because, like, yeah, you could have them scatter and go off and metamorphosize into actual troglodytes. Yeah, I could see them, like, scrubbing the mind, essentially, right? And you could find them. You could find the little, like, buboes or whatever, right? But I think it, like, does it fill the victim with doubt and denial? Someone infected by the bite refuses to do anything about it. Do anything about it. Lets the wound, lets them fester. I think the turnaround has to be really fast too. I think it's like a matter of hours or days, the incubation period. Gain levels of exhaustion. once every hour. They make a save. On a failure, they gain a level of exhaustion. For 5 levels of exhaustion. The target dies. Target dies. I keep scratching the wrong place. That's interesting. Yeah, I think it has some kind of a mind numbing effect. Yeah. So then, what happens after the dwarf dies? So I think these little like lice have bloated like ticks, right? And then they scamper off. Because that's basically what happens with Alien, right? Like it runs away and then it matures. It's kind of funny, yeah. Does it relocate? But I think they would know that it's in the beard, you know? Maybe that's the tell. It makes them scratch everywhere but their beard. Makes them scratch everywhere but their hair. Once the dwarf is dead, the trogs scamper away and molt into their proper forms. Body dehydrates into dust, they mummify. Maybe, yeah, something like that. I think it's like, yeah, an average dwarf can have up to 6 or 7 of these parasites, right? And so then you get these little clutches of troglodytes inside. Okay, I think that's kind of cool. It's like a lice thing. It's basically a face hugger. It's like a beard hugger, right? But I think that's neat. I like them having some dimorphism, right? That like a group of trogs will like. So then they wouldn't have like a queen. I mean, maybe they would have like a queen or something like that would lay the eggs, right? Like. Different forms. Worker, soldier, queen, beard huggers. The standard troglodyte, worker. I also think they have like. Do they have stingers that infect the target with their necrotic slime or whatever? Because I think that's more interesting than it's a bite and claw, which I think they have, right? But I think they have like a big like scorpion shelob stinger. They have the stench. Troglodyte. More powerful form of troglodyte. Necrotized mass nest. Oh, so you're saying they have to like kill a certain number of people and then drag them over and then make a nest there? It's interesting. It requires like fertilizer. So then they molt, right? And they have their adult forms or whatever. And then they go around and they kill enough people or dwarves to make a nest. And then they like heap them all up. And then one of them becomes the queen. Yeah, I always thought that was interesting. A thing with bugs where they can like... Yeah. Okay, I think that's fine. So they then hunt and kill enough bodies, preferably dwarves, to create a nest. Then one of the troglodytes Hey, what's up, Vaughn? Yeah, we're about to wrap up here, buddy. Then the troglodytes. So this I got from Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. Fight amongst each other. It's getting weird. It's getting gross. To determine who is the queen. Who is the queen? She undergoes the necessary transformation and mates with all the rest, laying her eggs on the corpse pile. Boom. Yep. So yeah, I think that's what a worker is. A standard troglodyte, a worker is almost the like larval state. Larval state. The worker is the troglodyte in between. So it's the troglodyte between hatching, right? Like killing the host and the like mating ceremony. So it's like the blank slate. A blank slate yet to transform into a queen or a soldier. Apart from the troglodyte, the soldier is what a troglodyte transforms into, what a worker transforms into when it doesn't become the queen. It protects the queen and allows her to lay more eggs. The highest form of troglodyte, queen lays eggs but is somewhat more vulnerable than the soldier and must be protected. Okay, yeah, and so then like they would go, if it's like 5 or 6 of these troglodytes, they would then go to a different area and do the same thing, right? So when, that's what's interesting. My original conception of I don't know Dragon Age very well, Vaughn. That's not one of my, I was basing this a lot off of a little bit of, obviously the Xenomorph is the big one, and then the Slake Moth from Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. That's what I was going off of. But yeah, the idea was to create this extremely alien, extremely gross insectoid creature that isn't just like, I'm a lizard who smells bad, which is what the standard troglodyte is. My original conception of them was that they had like poured up from cracks in the earth and they were a little bit more fully formed. You could still probably do that, because I think that that's important to some of the like history of some of these clans, but the idea of like an outbreak is also interesting too. Right, that they would come across all these eggs, and it would infect a bunch of dwarves. Yeah, I think that's fine. That still works for what I need Clan Deep Vein to do. Okay, let's think of some hooks. How do you kill troglodytes? They don't like fire? Not immediately Cthulhu inspired. No, it's similar. I mean, obviously it's spooky stuff. Trogs are sort of Yogg's implements, so you could say that it's sort of Yogg inspired. So what do you do? How do you kill a Trog? I like fire, because again, it feels like a good callback to Alien. I would say that radiant damage is probably the better move. We make a point about what harms or kills a troglodyte. What harms or kills a troglodyte? Radiant damage and sacrosteel. So the idea, right, is that if they sort of come up from the cracks in the earth, that they are subject to that like the earth, has the crust and the mantle and all this stuff, but the core of the earth is protected by a shell of sacrosteel, of this like rare saintly ore that was put there to contain Yogg, was ostensibly built by Umbor, while the rest of the earth was made by Yogg. So I think then sacrosteel has to do, fire makes sense. Molten metal will kill just about anything. Sacrosteel is especially effective against evil creatures, especially effective against demons and undead and stuff like that. I think they would count against troglodytes. It's like the thing that was meant to contain them, especially effective against holy ore, effective against demons, undead, and troglodytes. Similarly, radiant damage. Radiant damage is extra effective against trogs. I like that. You have to like expunge their nests, right? Yeah, I couldn't decide what to do with the meteorite metal. I think there probably is one. I didn't find a great place for it. Maybe the Duvidaz, but I think that, yeah, the Duvidaz could be. The Duvidaz is basically the Arkenstone. It's like the crown jewel of the Dwarven kingdom that was lost during the Seven Sorrows. So maybe the Duvidaz is like a meteorite, and it's it's a gem. It's like I don't know exactly. Oh yeah. It changes colors depending on different circumstances. Borax. I think that's cool for troglodytes. Other stuff. We didn't come up with any hooks. How would you use them? I mean, beyond obviously like, yeah, an NPC the party knows or likes becomes infected by troglodytes. It's obviously a plot. An outbreak in the hold or whatever is another classic. Have known the pure killing machines and got by Yogg to lay waste to dwarven settlements. I think they do have stingers. Yeah, there's definitely a zombie thing going on there for sure. No, Jose. That's a fun idea, but no. I need the Arkenstone to be good. The Arkenstone does have a secret about it, but I can't tell you what that secret is because of spoilers. But it is not an Eldritch Horror egg. It's a cool idea, but no, I'm not going to do that with the Arkenstone. I don't know. I feel like they're pretty self-explanatory. Like beyond just like coming across a nest of them. I mean, yeah, the party encounters a nest of these gems, not realizing what they truly are. It's made in China, yeah, very cheaply. Predator jaws with stinger tongues. Oh, like they open up. That's kind of cool. Yeah, maybe do they have a ranged weapon? Oh, they spit acid. Yeah, that's what they do. They spit acid. And maybe they don't all spit acid, right? Maybe just soldiers. Or maybe just the soldiers have stingers. Just soldiers. I think they all spit acid. Or, necrotic acid or whatever, yeah. And yeah, I think you could have them have like the jaws that open up. Yeah, that's definitely true. I think you stepped in just a little too late to talk about that, Vaughn. But we had a whole conversation about their life cycle that involves basically hatching these like the eggs look like gems, sort of precious stones, and then when you interact with them, they pop, and then this ichor comes out, and it like the tiny little like hatchlings that are basically lice get into the dwarf's beard or the dwarven woman's hair, and then they stick into the host and they drain them of their blood, and it's a whole big thing. So yeah, there definitely is. Oh, you mean like a living host? Oh yeah, because there's that scene in Alien too, right? Like, the party discovers nest of the gems. Yeah, well, because the idea is that the yeah, Yeah, that's great. Mid-hosting, yeah. Encounters a community quarantined. quarantined by troglodytes due to infection, right? That's a very zombie movie thing, right? You come across the community that is under quarantine. That's cool. Okay, so we have the Darrow we talked about. We talked about frost giants, and we talked about troglodytes. I'd say 10 more minutes maybe. Are there any other bad guys to talk about? The Durgar I'm going to keep secret for now, I think. But they factor into the campaign as well. These are the big villain groups. We've talked about goblins before. They have the kind of like mimic culture, right? Frost giants, Darrow. Let's look at my big list down here. I just made a list of all of the monsters that are listed as being underground or mountain related or Arctic. And I'd like to use as many of them as I can. Aboleths. A trog-infected Darrow, that's funny. That's cool. Yeah, let me change it to that. Encounters a dwarven community. A dwarven community. Seals off a neighborhood due to... Hey, what's up, Alan? Troglodyte outbreak. Dude, you missed it. We just talked about some really gross monster, like alien shit that you would have loved. We had a whole conversation about aliens and Predator and everything, and now we're done with it, so that sucks. Can the players find the nest before the neighborhood is wiped out? That's great, Vaughn. Very good. It's wiped out. So are there any of these other monsters down here we want to talk about really quick? A lot of them seemed like they were like single cases, you know, rather than being like, let's talk about them and their culture. Coatua, maybe I could see talking about. I am curious about what to do with the other kinds of giants, because I feel like I don't have like a unified umbrella theory for my giants in Undune, you know? Umber Hulks I have something for. Purple Worms I have something for. Grimlocks I have something for. Giant Eagles I have something for. Myconids are cool. You guys want to talk about Myconids? Let's do that. Let's just do a quick, like a mini on Myconids. I got about 15 minutes. Myconids. And they're kind of a people. You know, you could talk about their culture and stuff. Blindness cubes are cool. But again, I feel like there's not a lot to say about them, right? Summary. Let's talk about Myconids. What else are we saying? Biology, yeah. Culture. Biology. Culture. History. Yes, the mushroom people, the Myconids. Hooks and threats. So I don't know. Like, I don't know tons about Myconids in 5e. Let me see. New window. I'm gonna look up D&D Beyond. Thanks, Vaughn, for your very generous gift. At a certain point, it's gonna expire, and I'm gonna be a sad boy. I think we still got like 6 months left on it, but Vaughn, if those of you who don't know, was very kind and got me a subscription to D&D Beyond, which has been invaluable. Myconids. Myconid sovereigns, Myconid colonies. There's not a lot of information, actually, about Myconids, beyond just what's in the monster manual. They have an interconnected intelligence. Yeah, I totally agree, Vaughn. I think fewer monsters are definitely better. Yeah, I agree. I just made a list of all the ones. I don't know if we would use all of these. This is just everything that I could find. It definitely should be, yeah. You were just very generous, my man. Yeah, intelligent ambulatory fungi that live in the Underdark, seek enlightenment, and deplore violence. That's interesting. If approached peacefully, Myconids gladly provide shelter or allow safe passage to their colonies. Okay, yeah, they do like a zombie thing. That's cool. They can like bring back a spore servant as any large creature brought back to life by the animating spores of a myconid sovereign. And it's like a template you put on top of another creature. That's cool. I like that. I like that they're peaceful, you know? Circles and melds. The largest myconid colony is its sovereign, which presides over one or more social groups called circles. Circle consists of 20 or more myconids that live, work, and meld together. A meld is a form of communal meditation that allows myconids to transcend their dull subterranean existence. A myconid's rapport spores bind the participants into a group consciousness. Hallucination spores then induce a shared dream that provides entertainment and social interaction. Myconids consider melding to be the purpose of their existence. They pursue it. I mean, this is all good. Like, just somebody like, okay, we got a lot in the chat here. How big are they? I would love them having a one-sided hate for dwarves, since dwarves find that to be a delicacy. That's interesting. Yeah, I was wondering about how they would interact with dwarves, them being smaller than dwarves. I think it just depends on the individual myconid. It's too bad because like they are so peaceful. I hate to have them immediately have like a one-sided hate for dwarves. They should have suffused somebody like Tempe. Vaughn asks, what about a monster that started off either natural or sentient and has been corrupted by Yogg? Do any monsters match that? The the Trogs definitely match on some level, but I think the Trogs were basically created by Yogg. The Duergar definitely match that, Vaughn. Duergar are basically Yogg corrupted dwarves, but I cannot go into too many details about the Duergar because one of the people that I wanted to play in the campaign is currently in the chat. So if I talk about my Duergar secrets, they will be, they will be aired here where they should not be aired. So peaceful mushroom folk who commune via spores. I like the spoilers, yeah. But yes, the Duergar definitely match that description. They are absolutely been corrupted by Yogg. And I think in other campaigns, there are lots of would be other examples like tieflings in general. Tieflings and drow are both races that have been corrupted by Yogg. Or dark elves, or Svartoi, I think I call them. But since this takes place a little bit before Yogg kind of breaks out, there's not too many things. Yogg doesn't have too direct of an influence. The Trogs are one of the big examples of Yogg, like, sending creatures out into the world. It hadn't really done that too much up to this point. Yeah, like, what is their culture? Like, how do they react? How do myconids... that's possible. React to... How do myconids react to dwarves? Are they friends? Enemies? Like, I don't want to just, like, say, oh, enemies. I get that idea, right? That, like, people would eat them, or they would try to eat them, right? Like, I like them as being ents for mushrooms, right? Like, shepherds who herd giant mushrooms, who herd and grow giant mushrooms in the Underdark. I think history-wise, I don't know from Ancient or Seven Sorrows, but I think in recent history, they have spread through the Stoneways due to the lack of dwarves in the tunnels. Yeah, I think that's great. I like that idea. It's I do a similar thing with goblins, where a goblin is maybe usually small size, but they can be of different sizes. I don't know, Jose. How do you make a book out of an ant? They fear troglodytes. Would be terrifying or repulsive. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think they unnerve and unsettle dwarves. I think dwarves are afraid of them. Dwarves fear them. That's so bad. Get out of here, Jose. Dwarves fear them and consider them strange or unnatural. You know, kind of like in the way that, you know, if you ate mushrooms, right, how suddenly the mushrooms, like, coming alive and talking to you would be frightening, right? Like, that's, if you eat one, what happens to you? A dwarves fear being assimilated. Like, there's something about them that's unnerving. I like that. Biology, a myconid. What if myconid is a term for an awakened mushroom? That all myconids are simply mushrooms that have shared consciousness with another myconid, right? So it's like a viral thing. It's like they interact with the mushrooms, and the mushrooms come awake and they become myconids, right? So that way you could get ones of different sizes, different species and sizes. I do not know what happens if you eat one. I think they're basically just mushrooms. Yeah, I think that makes sense. They consider myconids to be bad eating. Worry about becoming infected, which I think, because it's D&D, why not? You know, that, like, eating a myconid grants you visions of the colony or whatever. Dwarves they love eating myconids. If they share a consciousness, they better share the pain. Yikes. I like them being suspicious of them. They fear troglodytes. Hide from them. Yeah, I like the idea of it being, you know, like how Ents and horns are a thing, right? That, like, horns are sort of slumbering trees. Like, I like that they're peaceful and that they don't seek to, like, conquer anything. But I do like the sense of spread, right? That like they will awaken all mushrooms. You know, that's their goal. They're almost like a mushroom Borg, right? To spread the consciousness. To awaken all mushrooms. Yeah, right? Eat their veggies, they'll turn into myconids. They infect dead bodies and animate them to serve their purposes. To carry more spores, etc. Oh, that's cool. Myconids also have a deep shared history that can contradict common. I like the idea of, like, a dwarf going native. That, like, there are dwarves that are infected, and among the colonies that have essentially turned their backs on being dwarves, right? They're like brainwashed or whatever. Brainwashed. Yeah, that's cool. Myconid history contradicts. Yeah. Dwarven history. I don't think that there's, like... I think it's more isolated than there being, like, actual mushroom cults. Like, maybe there's, like, one... Yeah, one dwarven... They've entered the Matrix, yeah. One dwarven hold or clan has essentially fallen prey to the myconids and now dwells as mushroom people. That's kind of a cool, you would eventually discover this clan, right? And they've got, like, fungi growing on them and shit. Yeah, that's cool. Viewed as heresy. And again, I like that they're not violent, right? Like, you could get infected and that could sort of make you turn into a weird mushroom person, but it wouldn't, like, non-violent. The danger with a myconid. Danger with a myconid is losing your perspective. Is losing your perspective and your identity. To the colony. Not dying in battle. Like, they would never attack you. But it's like... Yeah. That's cool. A rich history going back thousands of years. Myconids. Myconid mythology stands at odds. Right, exactly. With every other race's history. Understanding of the world. During the Seven Sorrows. Not sure what they did during the Seven Sorrows. Yeah, that's good. A multicellular organism. The whole, not the individual. That's all great. Yeah, this is good, guys. Nice job. Yeah, Nerva and Cell Dwarves. Yeah, that's cool. They blossomed during this time, feeding on the death and destruction in the Underdark, or in the Stoneways. Oh, that's cool. Myconids is the first alarm created for Yogg's escaping. Yogg escaping. To cry when Yogg's jail gets a crack near them. Yeah, maybe there's something about that they like. They are sentinels against incursion too deep. I think they were like, in that case, they were like slaughtered by Clan Deepvein, who saw them as an infection and a danger. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it was like a colony of them. I don't think it was like all myconids everywhere know about Yogg, but I like the idea of like especially deep ones way down there that tried to warn the dwarves against it and they just didn't listen. Yeah, that's cool. Some more hooks. The party accidentally ingests some myconids and goes bananas. That's that C-Team adventure, right? Yeah. The myconids attempt to warn the party about something, but must commune with them to convey the information, right? It's like, do you accept them? They're trying to help you, but do you accept them into your brain, and what does that do to you? Yeah, I think that's cool. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Okay, I gotta get out of here. I think that's great, guys. That's very cool. I wasn't expecting to even get a fourth monster in, but I think that's a really interesting group that I hadn't even really considered before. Let me pop these guys out and put them higher. Yeah, that's great. No, that's a good one, Vaughn. Let me put that down too. Myconids will be up here after Frost Giants. Cool. Myconids. I'll just do this, and I can reorganize it later, but for now. Cool. Let me put another one in. The myconids have some information the party needs. I mean, it's similar to this, right? Like, I'll just rephrase it. Myconids have information the party needs, but they must commune with them to learn that information. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, everybody, I think that's going to be it for tonight. Sorry for those of you, Vaughn and Alan, who just came in sort of at the tail end of it. But it was very productive, hanging out mostly with Jose, but I can't say it, Pseudonymous? I can't do it. Was also hanging out for a while, and that was cool. I'll probably do another one next week. I have the spot reserved. And I'm not sure what we'll talk about. We'll have to figure it out. But thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. Let me get all this stuff organized. Yeah, cool. Yeah, whatever. I'll get there. Yeah, we'll post a poll about it, and we'll come back and we'll do some more work. But I think this was very productive. Thanks for coming and hanging out, everybody. I will see y'all next week. Adios.